increasing positive emotions and releasing suppressed emotions. So we kind of pair them up sometimes because they sound similar. But releasing suppressed emotions from a radical remission perspective is trying to let go of some, all the stuff from our pasts, right? Like releasing negative things that come up. Sometimes it's even nostalgia for, someone who's living in the past. Oh, I still wish I was living in those glory days. Living in the past, as those were the best days that you were able to have, allows you, prevents you from really being able to see what you have ahead of you. So letting go of those nostalgic moments, it's different than having a memory or gratitude, but nostalgia really kind of locks you into a time period. So we like to think of it as, if you were to imagine yourself standing under a waterfall and just letting the water pour over you and just rinsing out all of the things that we have bottled up over time, whether it's ill feelings towards a loved one or a difficult job or different things that cause stress, having a diagnosis, making sure that it is getting out and not being stifled. And that is hugely impactful. This is a really powerful one. And quite often, we hear this one being one of the more difficult ones for people, for sure.
Yeah, I would imagine, because if they have bottled it up, there's a reason for that. That was either providing protection, or there was a fear, there was something that was driving them to suppress that in the first place. So getting comfortable and being and able to have the courage to release that is really what it takes. It does take the courage, and it takes the intentionality to do it in a way that's going to be safe, so that they can kind of, like what you were talking about before, about at the table, that you're seen, that you're heard, and that you're respected, and that you have a voice. And so that's kind of what you're describing, as far as releasing that and letting go of that. I always like to say to people, keep your fork, because, that used to be the saying, for having your fork for dessert, not necessarily that you're going to eat the dessert, but the dessert is the next day, the next week, the next phase of your life. And so the best is yet to come. And that's why they say, keep the fork.
Yeah, keep the fork. I'm going to steal that.
Go ahead.
I love it. That's so good. I love it. So the counterpoint to that one factor was increasing positive emotions. And what was I find really interesting about this factor is that the research showed that everybody found their way to increase their positive emotions, but almost practicing it like it was a muscle that needed to be nurtured and grown. So very often, depression can be, very common, or even a depressive time can happen when you have a big diagnosis like cancer. So making sure that you completely allow yourself some joy every single day, to start with 5 minutes a day. And whether that's looking at pictures in your phone of friends and family, or turning on comedy. I personally love to watch, there's a series of videos on YouTube called Cat versus Cucumber. And if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend giving it a look. There's lots of videos, oddly enough, where if you put a cucumber behind a cat that's not looking, when they turn and see it, they jump up really high. So it cracks me up. So YouTube does have a lot of safe, fun videos for humor and increasing positive emotions. There's so much value to that, because it activates what we call our internal pharmacy, and floods our bodies with all of these healing hormones, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins that are needed, that boost our immune system. And that's kind of the science behind a lot of these factors, is how can we use our brain and those hormones to boost our immune system? And we have to just activate them through things like feeling empowered, or increasing your positive emotions, releasing your suppressed emotions. So these are all things that have that impact on our bodies from a very healing place, and trying to keep ourselves out of that fight or flight mode, if you've heard that term, where, your body's going into a state of fear. And a lot of times that happens when you hear the words, you have cancer. So making sure that you allow time every day to increase that positivity is really key to healing.
Absolutely. And it's also balancing the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous
Yes.
systems, which is actually what you're talking about. And oftentimes even doing something like singing, or just humming can actually stimulate the vagus nerve, which actually can be helpful in that process too. So it doesn't have to be, hours of comedy. Like you said, it's probably a short little video. But I know that we've had Dr. Keith Scott Mumby on here before who had mentioned, just 3 minutes. And even Dr. Bernie Siegel had talked about that, just a few minutes every single day of some joy, of some humor. Yes, because it really does matter. And that can actually help improve our immune system. And that stays with us, and then if we even think about it, if it's really funny, chances are we're chuckling, 2 hours later because we thought about something that happened before.
Exactly.
So it's a nice little residual effect of that.
Yeah. And I love when we do the radical remission workshop, we talk about the science behind each factor. And one of the most interesting studies in the whole workshop to me is in this factor, increasing positive emotions. There's a study that was done on people that were in chemotherapy, and half of them were told, do your thing the way you always do. And the other half were shown comedy videos. And at the end of the research, they found that the people who watched comedy had higher quality of life. They had higher resilience. Their chemotherapy was more effective. So really amazing things can come out of something simple like watching comedy while in chemo. Why not do something like that? And it doesn't have to be comedy. If that's not your thing, have a gratitude journal, or like I said, look at some pictures of babies and kittens and puppies, whatever does it for you.